Hello and welcome to the ManageIQ Sprint 162 review. This was a regular 2-week sprint. I'll provide the overview. Kavya will update us on the UI, Adam on the providers, Jason on the platform, the API, and the developer. So this sprint, we bumped back up in terms of the number of pull requests opened as well as merged. So we went back to 97 and 129. So that's hopefully a start of a good trend as we have a few more people at IBM working on ManageIQ now. In terms of the distribution, 38 were enhancements, 34 bugs. So kind of a good split as we fix the last of the Gloucester bugs that are being found, as well as work on the next release, which will be called Morphe. And with that, I will turn it over to Kavya.
Yep, thanks, Oleg. Good afternoon, everyone. This sprint total 11 PRs got merged into UI repos, 8 are bugs and 3 enhancements. Next slide, please. Here, one of the community user raised this issue. In edit catalog form, when something changed in tree, continue button is not getting enabled at all, and they're not able to see that, save the tree settings. And root cause of this problem is just trees in React, whereas the rest of the form is in Angular, and so it's not able to detect React events in Angular form. So this is fixed in this PR. You can refer PR for more details. Next slide. Here in any table, when we enter something in the search, right-hand side title changes, and when user click on add or edit form at the same time, then such title is being carried to the create form too, which is weird. Fix that issue here. Next slide, please. This PR, this is based on a core PR done by Joar. Non-admin users and for non-admin users, some of the privileges are broken. After his core PR changes, now we can see the broken pages even with the admin users, just like the before screenshot here. And once it is fixed, you can see that page is rendered, and probably Jason or somebody will share more details in the core for the core PR in the next slides. Next slide, please. Here, Joar fixes this issue in settings worker page. Previously, code was checking only workers value and using queue workers base, but not falling back to the worker space if other 2 locations are empty. For more information, please check the PR. Next slide, please. This is an enhancement. VM rename form is converted to React and Carbon. Next slide. This is an enhancement too. Jones create edit form is converted to React and Carbon. Next slide, please. Similar to previous ones, subnets form is converted to Carbon and React, and this particular form is quite challenging, and they did a great job on this one. And thanks to Adam for all the help on this form from provider's side. I think that's all. That's all from UI. With that, over to Adam.
Thanks, Kavya. So for providers this sprint, we added a default targeted refresh strategy. The refresh strategy tells the inventory refresh gem how it should resolve lazy references to other collections. And for targeted refresh, it turned out that every provider that was implementing targeted refresh set the same strategy. So it was simple enough to move that into the base class, and then it makes it easier for provider subclasses to implement targeted refresh with less code, less overrides, and just generally makes the whole thing cleaner. We fixed a bug where we're now only queuing metrics capture for providers which support metrics. Previously, we were checking only on the EMS type. So like we would queue metrics capture for every infra or cloud manager, for example. And there are a number of new cloud providers which don't support metrics capture yet. So what we ended up with was just thousands and thousands of perf captures on the queue, which would never be dequeued because there's no metrics capture worker that's going to dequeue them. So we got that fixed up. We also finished pluggable provider secrets. So we removed the VCR filter secrets from the core spec helper, which was mostly working, but not possible to work for some of the provider subclasses. So it was sort of a half-baked solution that would kind of work for everybody. Now we push that logic down into the providers if they want to enhance it, and we deleted it from the core spec helper. This sprint, we also added support for inventory syndication to a Kafka topic. So previous sprints and releases, we added this for events and subsequently metrics, which obviously leaves inventory as the last one. It took a little bit because it's a little bit more complicated for inventory. But if we go over to the next slide, we have a short demo showing this. So in this case, I have an AWS provider. So first thing, if you're doing this locally in development, you need to make sure that your Kafka broker is running. So in this case, I have a little systemd unit that's running Kafka for me. So it's running on the default localhost 9092 port. So the next thing you would have to do is configure your messaging YAML. This is also able to be configured via environment variables, but you can do the messaging YAML here. So you can see I had localhost and 9092. So when you install Kafka, you get a kind of neat little command line consumer. So we're giving it our Bootstrap server, which is the local broker, and the topic of manageiq.ems-inventory. So if you do want to set this up, that's the topic that you'll look for. And so you see we did a refresh, and it's essentially dumping all of the inventory objects to the topic. So if you want to listen to that, you can see exactly what inventory is present and do whatever you want to do with that. So that's able to be configured with a setting, and also only enabled if you set the Kafka messaging type, which is the same for all the other syndications. That's it for that demo. Next slide. For IBM Cloud VPC, a pretty big chunk of work landed this sprint where instance provisioning is now supported. So you can go through and do lifecycle provisioning for VPC. Thanks to Jared for that. It was a huge amount of work spanning a lot of months, and I finally finished it this sprint, which is great. He also fixed an issue with tag parsing. If there was a tag with a colon in the name, VPC indicates that a colon is separating the tag name and value. But if there was a colon in the name, then our parser wasn't handling that properly. So now we are. So last sprint, we talked about the new plugin for IBM Power VC, which is the OpenStack distribution running on Power architecture. So the plugin was included in the organization last sprint, and this sprint, it's now included in the main gem file. So you can add it without having to do any tweaks to your gem set. It's just available, and please go start testing it. Kubernetes, so as part of the work to only queue supported metrics providers, there are some providers which have configuration that are required. So for example, Kubernetes and OpenShift, you have to add a separate metrics endpoint for your either Prometheus or Hawkular. So one of the things we did is take advantage of the supports feature mix-in, and we're saying that the provider instance doesn't support metrics capture if you haven't added the credentials for it. So that was a nice little side enhancement that we got out of that refactoring. We also found an issue on Power. If OpenShift or Kubernetes is running on Power, the nodes sometimes have a null byte in the system UUID. And so that was causing, previously it was causing the cross-link lookup to fail. We found that it also caused the node save inventory to fail. So this sprint, we fixed that last one, and refresh is working successfully on OpenShift on Power now. Next slide. For Amazon EKS, we found that the kube client gem included their own EKS credentials, which actually looked a lot like the implementation that we had, even though we were completely unaware of it. So it was A, nice that we got it right, but B, even nicer that we can delete it. So we're now deleting our custom overrides and using the EKS credentials directly from kube client. Sorry. Ansible Tower, we had a community user open an issue that if he was using nested workflows for his jobs, that our runner was failing, and it was actually failing on a lookup because the Tower API was returning a job ID for a workflow when we were expecting it to be in the jobs collection. So it's kind of a weird, almost an API bug, at least an inconsistency on the tower side, but we added code to support looking up the proper collection, even if it's in the jobs ID. So nested workflows now work with Ansible Tower Provider. For Azure, similar to Kubernetes, we're also only queuing metrics capture if we,
sorry about that.
No worries.
Go ahead.
So if the Insights service on Azure isn't enabled, we also can't get metrics. And so we took advantage of that as well for the supports feature on Azure. That's it for that. Next slide. OpenStack. So as Kavya mentioned, the cloud subnet DDF form was quite complicated. And so David did a huge amount of work to get this working, and it ended up looking really nice. Initially, it was looking in the wrong collection for cloud networks, but we also found that allocation pools are being passed incorrectly, and it also wasn't pulling in the cloud tenant ID properly. So as part of this, he also fixed a large number of bugs in the existing DDF form. So huge props to David for working through that. Ended up looking really good. So this is the last provider holdout to support pluggable provider secrets. So with that merge, we were able to close out that whole issue, but that's the PR for Overt, which implemented this. And finally, for VMware, we handle vSphere tag categories, which have multiple tags in them. We were mapping the category to the label name and the tag as the value, but that doesn't really work if you have multiple tags in the same category. And so we handle the multiple tag category cardinality a little bit differently for that. We're also going through some VMware Web Service cleanup, where we remove a couple of unused classes for the Vim broker. And we also dropped the manage IQ password dependency. And I think finally that's it for providers. Not used to talking this much, so sorry for the coughing. Next slide. Over to Jason.
Thanks, Adam. No, man, now I think I need water. On the platform side, for enhancements, Nick L changed it so Postgres admin was used directly for DB backups in the appliance console. This is part of the effort to get database backups out of the application and into a lower level construct, in this case, appliance console. Lucy added a PR a long time ago to verify the depot settings on the queue so that eventually that could be called through the API, and it just got merged this sprint. Keenan changed the way we launch our services under systemd. Previously, it was using a bash script and then sourcing in environment variables. But due to his work getting the environment variables into an environments file, we can now just call Ruby directly from systemd, and it eliminates that bash shell overhead. And another thing Keenan worked on as part of his work to get us toward not having to run as root, we no longer dump the settings when the workers start. One of the problems he's having with root is that everything logs into the same directory of both root and non-root, and we're trying to split that. And this dumping of settings was creating a file causing that problem. We don't really need it. It's mainly for diagnostic purposes, but we can get the information other ways. So we're getting rid of that file. On the bug side, Joe R. led an effort to fix various typos or misconfigurations of the product features, which mainly affected users who were non-admins logging in. They may have been given a permission, and then when they go to the actual page, it doesn't work. And he found a number of these, ended up writing a test that can detect a lot of these problems, and in doing so, fixed a lot of the problems in both the core repo, the API repo, and also the UI Classic repo, which I don't have links for, but gazillion issues he went through and fixed. So huge props to Joe for that one. I think there's still more that he's going through, but he got through a lot of the big complicated, or the more simple ones that were, bang for the buck. I worked on an issue where with FixAuth that we've been having for a while, causing sporadic test failures. And it turned out, thanks to Joe, who was able to isolate the problem, it was a collision during recrypt during FixAuth. So when we try to fix passwords and convert them from an old key to a new key, sometimes two different keys can decrypt the same string and not blow up, but it won't actually produce real text. It will just produce garbage. It's a rare case, but it can happen. And so now we can detect that now, and that was fixed. And finally, Brandon fixed an issue with the podified deployments where if you use a cert for your Postgres connection, the cert was put into the container in essentially the wrong file location, and it was being ignored. So he fixed that in this release. Next slide, please. On the API side, Nick L fixed 2 issues. One was the subquery res count. Actually, I just forgot what the actual fix was here, but it ended up causing particular problems depending on how you filtered, and he fixed that problem. And the second problem he fixed was on the zones. When you went to edit a zone, zone has a column called settings, but you're also separately able to access settings, which is the advanced settings. And because of that name collision, you couldn't actually ever edit the column level settings on the zones controller. So he fixed that problem. So if you go to edit a zone, you can set the column level settings and they'll work now. Next slide, please. And finally, on the developer side, Nick L fixed a bug where during queue simulation, it would not honor the deliver on. This would cause the simulator to essentially run the queue items out of order or in the wrong order. And so now the simulator honors deliver on and they should come out in the expected order. In guides, Adam added 2 guides, one for how to add provider events to a new provider and how to add a simple targeted refresh to a provider. So if you're creating a new provider, adding on to his previous guides, this will take you further through the steps of creating a new provider. And finally, on the website, we had a blog post from Thad on Manage IQ performance results and improvements. This was his journey with Joe R on some performance inconsistencies that he found and the ultimate fix that was put in, I believe, last sprint or the sprint before. And that's it.
All right, well, thank you guys. And that brings us to the end of sprint 162. Next sprint will be in 2 weeks, same time, same Zoom channel. And with that, I want to thank everyone, the speakers, the contributors, and the community at large. And see you next time. Thanks, everyone.